The distant wail of a steam locomotive pierced the dry Texas air as dust devils danced across the vacant lot where the auction was about to begin. Dahlia Blackwood clutched her reticule with trembling fingers, her heart pounding against her corset like a wild mustang trying to break free. She hadn't come to Marfa. Texas, by choice desperation, had driven her here, to this forsaken corner of the frontier, where her fate would be decided by the fall of a gavel. Marfa, 1885. The town had sprung up like a defiant weed in the vast Chihuahuan desert, drawing ranchers, merchants, and outlaws alike to its dusty streets. The auction house stood as one of the town's more respectable establishments, though what was happening inside its walls today was anything but respectable. Dahlia surveyed the crowded room, trying to appear calm despite the terror clawing at her insides. Her late father's debts had caught up with them, and her cousin Edmund, now her legal guardian, had decided the easiest way to settle accounts was to auction off the family's remaining possessions. Including, it seemed, Dahlia herself. Not directly, of course. That would be illegal. But Edmund had arranged a labor contract that amounted to little more than indentured servitude, and he'd invited certain men to bid who had made their unsavory intentions toward Dahlia painfully clear. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer called out, his voice silencing the murmurs that filled the room. "We have a special item today, a 7-year labor contract for Miss Dahlia Blackwood, educated in Boston and skilled in household management, music, and literature." Dahlia felt her cheeks burn as dozens of eyes raked over her. At 22, she was no longer a girl, but she'd never felt more helpless. "Bidding starts at $50, the auctioneer announced. "50, called a voice from the back. "60, shouted another. Dahlia recognized that second voice, Silas Tanner, owner of the saloon at the edge of town. A widower 3 times over, each wife mysteriously passing after barely a year of marriage. The thought of being bound to such a man made her blood run cold. $100, came a smooth drawl from a man leaning against the far wall. Randall Burke, the cattle baron whose sprawling ranch lay just outside town. His reputation with women was notorious. $150, countered another voice, belonging to a man Dahlia didn't recognize, but whose hungry eyes told her everything she needed to know about his intentions. The bidding escalated quickly, the amount climbing higher as Edmund stood nearby, a satisfied smirk on his face. He'd make a tidy profit from her misery. $300, called Tanner, his voice thick with intent. $350, Randall Burke countered casually, as if bidding on a horse. Dahlia's eyes darted frantically around the room, searching for some escape, some savior. The women present, few as they were, averted their gazes, unwilling or unable to intervene. The auction was technically legal, even if morally reprehensible. $500, said a new voice, silky with confidence. Dahlia turned to see Zachary Morton, the owner of the largest mining operation in the county. He was surrounded by 4 armed men, his personal security. His eyes were cold as he assessed her, like she was a vein of ore to be exploited. $500 going once. The auctioneer called, clearly pleased with the high bid. Dahlia felt the room spin. This couldn't be happening, not to her, not like this. Going twice. Suddenly, the doors of the auction house swung open with a bang. Heads turned as a tall figure, silhouetted by the harsh sunlight, stepped inside. The newcomer moved with the easy grace of a man accustomed to commanding attention, spurs jingling softly with each deliberate step. As he came into focus, Dahlia could make out a weather-beaten Stetson, a sun-bronzed face with sharp cheekbones and eyes the color of a summer storm. "What's the meaning of this?" the auctioneer demanded, irritated by the interruption. The stranger's gaze swept the room before landing on Dahlia. For a brief moment, something unreadable flashed across his features. "You can't auction her," he stated, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man unaccustomed to being questioned. "And why's that, mister?" Morton challenged, his armed men shifting into alert positions. The stranger moved closer, coming to stand beside Dahlia. She felt the reassuring warmth of his presence as he removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "Because," he said calmly, "that woman is my wife." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Dahlia stared at the man in shock. She had never seen him before in her life. "Your wife?" Edmund sputtered, stepping forward. "That's preposterous. This is my cousin, and I have legal authority, Jackson Xanders." The man introduced himself, extending a hand not to Edmund but to Dahlia. His eyes met hers, communicating something urgent and unspoken. "I've been searching for you, darling. When you didn't return from visiting your family, I feared the worst." Dahlia hesitated only a fraction of a second before placing her hand in his. "Jackson," she breathed, hoping her voice conveyed the right mixture of surprise and relief. "I have our marriage certificate right here," Jackson continued, reaching into his vest pocket and producing an official-looking document. He handed it to the auctioneer, who examined it with a frown. "This appears to be in order," the auctioneer said reluctantly. "Married 6 months ago in Austin." Edmund snatched the paper. "This is forgery. I demand—" "You demand nothing," Jackson interrupted, his voice hardening. "A husband's claim supersedes a cousin's guardianship. Any court in Texas would agree." He turned to the crowd. "I apologize for the confusion, gentlemen, but my wife is not for sale." Morton's eyes narrowed dangerously. "I don't take kindly to losing something I've bid on, Xanders. She's not something, Mr. Morton. She's someone. My wife." Jackson's hand moved subtly toward the holster at his hip. Morton glanced at Jackson's steady hand, then at his calm face, and seemed to reassess the situation. After a tense moment, he nodded curtly to his men. "Another time, perhaps." He turned and strode from the auction house, his armed entourage following. The crowd began to disperse, muttering and casting curious glances at the couple. Tanner and Burke lingered longer than the others, their expressions making it clear this wasn't the end of the matter. "You'll regret this interference," Edmund hissed at Jackson before storming off after Morton, no doubt hoping to salvage some arrangement. When they were relatively alone, Dahlia turned to her supposed husband. "Why did you help me?" Jackson Xanders replaced his hat, his expression inscrutable. "Let's get you out of here first, Mrs. Xanders. Then we can talk." He offered his arm, and Dahlia took it, feeling the solid strength beneath his shirt sleeve. As they stepped out into the harsh sunlight of Marfa, she had no idea if she'd just been rescued or traded one danger for another. But something in those storm-gray eyes made her trust him, at least for now. "My things," she began. "We'll send for them," he assured her, leading her toward a handsome bay horse tethered nearby. "Right now, I think it's best we put some distance between you and those men." Dahlia glanced back at the auction house, where Tanner and Burke still stood watching them. "I think you're right, Mr. Xanders. Jackson," he corrected, helping her mount before swinging up behind her. "Dahlia," she replied, though he already knew her name from the auction. As they rode away from town, Dahlia felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. She'd escaped the auction, but now she was alone with a stranger who had claimed her as his wife. A stranger whose strong arms encircled her as he guided the horse, whose chest pressed reassuringly against her back with each breath. "Where are we going?" she asked, raising her voice against the wind. "Somewhere safe," was all he said, urging the horse into a gallop. The desert landscape blurred around them as they rode west out of Marfa. Dahlia had 1,000 questions, but for now, She was content to feel the rhythmic hoofbeats carrying her away from what surely would have been a terrible fate. Jackson kept the horse at a steady pace for nearly an hour before slowing to give the animal a rest. They stopped beside a small creek that cut through the otherwise arid landscape, a ribbon of life in the desert. As Jackson helped her dismount, Dahlia finally got a proper look at her rescuer. He was tall, with broad shoulders that tapered to a lean waist. His face was all angles and planes, weathered by sun and wind but handsome in a rugged way. She guessed him to be in his early 30s. "You must have questions," he said, leading the horse to the creek. "A few hundred," Dahlia replied, smoothing her skirts nervously. "Starting with who are you really and why did you help me?" Jackson removed his hat and ran a hand through his dark hair. "I'm exactly who I said I am, Jackson Xanders. I ranch about 20 miles west of here." "And the part about being my husband," a small smile touched his lips. "That part was improvised. The marriage certificate, a real certificate with the names altered. I keep it for situations." Dahlia raised an eyebrow. "You frequently need to claim strange women as your wife." "No," he said seriously. "But I've found that having certain documents can be useful in this territory. The law is often whatever the person with the most persuasive paper says it is." Dahlia couldn't argue with that logic. "You still haven't told me why you helped me." Jackson knelt by the creek, filling a canteen. "I was in town to purchase supplies when I heard about the auction. I don't abide slavery in any form, and that's what they were doing, whatever they called it." He handed her the canteen. "Drink. It's a long ride to my ranch." Dahlia accepted it gratefully, suddenly aware of her parched throat. "Your ranch? Is that where we're going? For now, it's the safest place I know. Those men back there, Morton, Burke, Tanner, they're not the type to give up easily, especially Morton." "You know them." "I know of them. Morton's been buying up land all over the county by fair means or foul. Burke's cattle empire keeps growing, often at the expense of smaller ranchers. And Tanner." His expression darkened. "Let's just say his wives didn't die of natural causes, whatever the death certificates claim." Dahlia shuddered. "And my cousin sold me to them." "Your cousin seems like a special kind of vermin," Jackson agreed. "Is he your only family?" "Now he is. My father died 3 months ago. My mother passed when I was a child." Dahlia blinked back unexpected tears. "Edmund was appointed my guardian in my father's will. I never imagined he'd do something like this." Jackson's expression softened. "I'm sorry about your father and about what happened today." "Don't be. You saved me." Dahlia met his gaze directly. "Thank you for that, Mr. Xanders." "Jackson," he reminded her, then glanced at the sun's position. "We should keep moving. We want to reach the ranch before dark." As they continued their journey, the landscape gradually changed. The flat desert gave way to rolling hills dotted with mesquite and scrub oak. In the distance, mountains rose like sentinels against the vast Texas sky. "It's beautiful out here," Dahlia commented, finding herself relaxing against Jackson's chest as they rode. "It can be harsh," he replied, "but there's a freedom to it I've never found anywhere else." "Have you lived here long?" "5 years. Came out from Missouri after the war. You fought Union cavalry. When it ended, I couldn't go back to the life I had before." There was something in his voice that suggested there was more to that story, but Dahlia didn't press. "And now you're a rancher." "Trying to be. It's not easy, especially with men like Morton and Burke trying to control everything, but I've got good land and better water than most. I raise horses primarily, some cattle." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Dahlia spotted structures in the distance. As they drew closer, she could make out a modest but well-built ranch house, a large barn, several corrals and bunkhouses. "Welcome to the Crescent X," Jackson said as they approached. "It's not much." but it's mine." The ranch was more impressive than Jackson's modest description suggested. Everything was well maintained, the buildings solid and the corrals full of horses that even Dahlia's untrained eye could see were exceptional animals. As they rode into the yard, a man emerged from the barn, followed by several ranch hands who regarded Dahlia with undisguised curiosity. "Boss, we were getting worried," the first man called out. He was older, with a weathered face and silvery hair beneath his hat. "You're late back from town," and he stopped short when he noticed Dahlia. "I see you brought company." Jackson dismounted and helped Dahlia down. "Frank, this is Miss Dahlia Blackwood. She'll be staying with us for a while." "Dahlia, this is Frank Miller, my foreman and the reason this ranch hasn't fallen apart yet." Frank tipped his hat politely, though his eyes held questions. "Miss Blackwood, welcome to Crescent X." "Thank you," Dahlia replied, suddenly aware of how she must appear disheveled from the long ride, her dress dusty and wrinkled. "Frank, can you have someone see to my horse? Miss Blackwood and I have had a long journey." "Of course, boss." Frank signaled to one of the younger hands who hurried forward to take the reins. "Sarah's in the house. She can help get the lady settled." Jackson nodded. "We'll talk later," he told Frank, then guided Dahlia toward the main house. The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly comfortable. Simple furniture but well made, clean, polished floors, curtains at the windows and landscape paintings on the walls. It spoke of a man who cared about his home, not just a place to sleep. "Sarah," Jackson called out. A plump, middle-aged woman with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands appeared from what Dahlia assumed was the kitchen. "Mr. Xanders, you're finally back. I was just starting to worry." She stopped when she saw Dahlia, her eyes widening in surprise before warming with welcome. "And who might this young lady be?" "Sarah, this is Miss Dahlia Blackwood. She's going to be our guest for a while." "Dahlia, this is Sarah Thompson, the best cook in West Texas and the person who keeps this house from falling into bachelor chaos." Sarah wiped her hands on her apron and approached Dahlia with a smile. "Miss Blackwood, you look like you've had quite a journey. Let me show you to a room where you can freshen up, and then I'll bring you something to eat." "Thank you," Dahlia said gratefully. "That sounds wonderful." "I'll leave you in Sarah's capable hands," Jackson said. "I need to speak with Frank. We'll talk more over supper." As Jackson headed back outside, Sarah led Dahlia upstairs to a pleasant room with a comfortable-looking bed, a washstand with clean towels, and a window overlooking the ranch yard. "This is our guest room, though we don't get many visitors out here," Sarah explained, opening a wardrobe. "I keep a few things in here for emergencies. They might not fit perfectly, but they'll do until we can get your belongings." Dahlia glanced at the simple but clean dresses hanging in the wardrobe. "That's very kind, but I'm not sure if I have any belongings to retrieve. Everything I owned was at my cousin's house." Sarah's expression grew concerned. "Mr. Xanders didn't explain much when he rode in with you." "Are you in some kind of trouble, dear?" Dahlia hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "It's complicated, but Mr. Xanders helped me when I desperately needed it." Sarah nodded, as if this confirmed something she already suspected. "That sounds like him, always trying to right the world's wrongs." She patted Dahlia's hand. "Well, you're safe here. I'll draw you a bath and then you can rest before supper." Left alone, Dahlia sank onto the edge of the bed, the events of the day finally catching up to her. She'd awakened this morning believing her worst fear was being auctioned off to one of Marfa's unsavory characters. Now she found herself miles from town, in the home of a stranger who had claimed to be her husband. Yet despite the strangeness of her situation, Dahlia felt safer than she had in months. There was something about Jackson Xanders that inspired trust, a steadiness, an integrity she sensed beneath his reserved exterior. Still, she reminded herself, she barely knew him. And the men he'd crossed to help her were powerful and dangerous. Whatever sanctuary she'd found at the Crescent X might be temporary at best. After a refreshing bath and changing into one of the borrowed dresses, a simple blue cotton that was a bit loose in the bodice, but otherwise fit well enough, Dahlia made her way downstairs. She found Jackson and Frank seated at the kitchen table, their conversation halting abruptly as she entered. "Miss Blackwood," Jackson stood, pulling out a chair for her. "You look rested." "Thank you," she replied, taking the offered seat. "And thank you for the use of your guest room and clothes." Sarah bustled about the kitchen, bringing platters of food to the table: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables that looked like they'd come straight from a garden. "I hope you're hungry," Sarah said, setting the last dish down. "Mr. Xanders told us a bit about what happened in town today. Sounds like you've had quite an ordeal." Dahlia shot a questioning glance at Jackson, who nodded reassuringly. "I explained the situation to Frank and Sarah. They need to know what we might be facing." "And what exactly are we facing?" Dahlia asked, accepting a plate from Sarah. Frank answered, his voice gruff but kind. "Trouble, most likely. Zachary Morton doesn't take kindly to being thwarted, and neither do Burke or Tanner. Once they figure out the marriage certificate was falsified, and they'll come looking." "I'm so sorry," Dahlia said, suddenly feeling the weight of what Jackson had done for her. "I've put you all in danger." "You didn't do anything wrong," Jackson said firmly. "Your cousin and those men did, and I chose to get involved. Still, I should perhaps move on." "I could go to El Paso, or even back east." "And how would you get there?" Jackson asked. "Morton has men watching the stage-coach office and the train station. I'd bet my best stallion on it." "Besides," Frank added, "a young woman traveling alone would be easy prey, even without Morton looking for you." "Then what do you suggest?" Dahlia asked, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. Jackson and Frank exchanged glances. "For now, you stay here," Jackson said. "The ranch is defensible and my men are loyal. We keep watch, make preparations, and figure out our next move." "And what about the marriage certificate? When they discover it's false, that's why it might be best if it wasn't false," Frank said bluntly. Dahlia nearly choked on her water. "What?" Jackson shot Frank an exasperated look. "What Frank means is that if you and I were actually married, it would give us legal standing against your cousin's guardianship claims." "You're suggesting we actually get married?" Dahlia stared at Jackson in disbelief. "We barely know each other." "It would be in name only," Jackson clarified quickly. "A legal arrangement for your protection. Once the danger has passed and we've sorted out your cousin's claims on your property, we could quietly have it annulled." Dahlia set down her fork, appetite gone. "I appreciate everything you've done for me, Mr. Xanders, but marriage is. It's not something I can enter into lightly, even as a legal fiction." Jackson nodded, his expression understanding. "I'm not asking for an answer now. Take time to think about it. But know that whether you agree or not, you're welcome to stay here as long as necessary." The rest of the meal passed in awkward silence, broken only by Sarah's attempts to steer the conversation to safer topics. When they'd finished eating, Jackson excused himself to make final rounds of the ranch, and Frank retired to his quarters in one of the bunkhouses. Sarah began clearing the table, and Dahlia rose to help her. "Please, you don't have to," Sarah protested. "I want to," Dahlia insisted. "I need to be useful." As they worked side by side washing dishes, Sarah spoke softly. "He's a good man, you know, one of the best I've ever known." "Jackson," Sarah nodded. "My husband Tom and I came out here when Mr. Xanders first bought the ranch. Tom was his first hire." When Tom died of pneumonia 2 winters ago, Mr. Xanders insisted I stay on, gave me a proper wage for keeping house when most ranchers would have sent a widow packing. That was kind of him. It wasn't just kindness, it was respect. Sarah glanced at Dahlia. I've seen how he looks at you. He doesn't look at anyone else that way. Dahlia felt heat rise to her cheeks. He barely knows me. Sometimes a person just knows, Sarah said simply. I knew with Tom the first time I saw him, but that's not why I'm telling you this. She paused in her work, meeting Dahlia's eyes directly. I'm telling you because whatever you decide about his proposal, you can trust Jackson Xanders. He keeps his word, and he protects what's his. Later that evening, unable to sleep despite her exhaustion, Dahlia stood by the window of her room gazing out at the starlit ranch yard. The moon cast silver light over the corrals and outbuildings, transforming the workaday ranch into something almost magical. Movement caught her eye. Jackson, walking slowly around the perimeter of the main yard, rifle in hand. Even from a distance, she could see the alertness in his posture, the careful way he scanned the darkness beyond the ranch buildings. He was protecting her. A woman he didn't know, whose presence had brought danger to his home and people. The realization brought a lump to her throat. When he disappeared around the corner of the barn, Dahlia made a decision. Wrapping a borrowed shawl around her shoulders over her nightgown, she quietly made her way downstairs and outside. The night air was cool, a welcome relief after the heat of the day. Dahlia followed the path Jackson had taken, her slippered feet silent on the packed earth. She found him standing by the largest corral where several horses dozed on their feet or grazed in the moonlight. You should be inside, he said without turning, somehow sensing her presence. I couldn't sleep, Dahlia admitted, moving to stand beside him at the fence. Too much to think about. Jackson glanced at her, then back at his horses. I understand. It's been a day of unexpected turns for both of us. Why horses? She asked, nodding toward the animals. Why not just cattle like most ranchers around here? A small smile touched Jackson's lips. I've always understood horses better than people. They're honest. No pretense, no hidden motives. Just partnership based on mutual trust and respect. He pointed to a magnificent black stallion standing apart from the others. That's Midnight. Best stud I've ever bred. His offspring sell for top dollar all over the territory. He's beautiful, Dahlia said, admiring the horse's powerful lines. You've built something special here. I'm trying to, Jackson replied. It's not easy in this part of the country. Water rights, land disputes, cattle barons trying to push out smaller operations. And now Morton's mining interests changing the game again. Is that why those men at the auction are so dangerous? Not just because of me, but because of what you've built here. Jackson turned to face her fully. Morton's had his eye on my water rights for years. Burke wants my grazing land. They'd love nothing more than an excuse to move against me. But that doesn't mean I regret what I did today. Dahlia studied his face in the moonlight, the strong line of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes. I've been thinking about your proposal. And it's madness, she said softly. Complete madness to marry a man I just met today. It is, he agreed. But then again, everything about my life has become madness since my father died. She took a deep breath. If we do this, if I agree, I need to know what to expect. What kind of arrangement would it be exactly? Jackson leaned against the fence post, considering her question. Legally, you would be my wife. You would live here, share my name, be under my protection. But, he hesitated, I would not expect anything from you that you weren't willing to give. You would have your own room, your own privacy. And when the danger passes, when we've dealt with Morton and my cousin, then you would be free to decide your own future. If you wish to end our arrangement, I wouldn't stand in your way. Dahlia nodded slowly, weighing his words. And if I were to stay, not just until the danger passes, but after. Something flickered in Jackson's eyes, hope, perhaps quickly masked. Then that would be your choice as well. They stood in silence for a long moment, the only sounds the soft nickering of horses and the distant cry of a coyote. "I'll do it," Dahlia said finally. "I'll marry you, Jackson Xanders. For protection, for legal standing, for whatever reasons make sense. But I need you to promise me something. Name it. Promise me that if I ever want to leave, you'll let me go without question, no matter what happens between now and then." Jackson held her gaze, his expression solemn. "I promise." He extended his hand as if to seal a business arrangement. Instead of taking his hand, Dahlia stepped closer and placed a gentle kiss on his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, then turned and walked quickly back to the house, her heart pounding with the enormity of what she'd just agreed to. Behind her, Jackson stood motionless, his hand touching the spot where her lips had brushed his skin. The next morning, Dahlia awoke to the sounds of the ranch coming to life, men calling to each other, horses neighing, the clang of metal from what must be the blacksmith's forge. For a moment, she lay disoriented, memories of the previous day flooding back in a rush: the auction, the armed men, Jackson's unexpected intervention, and finally her agreement to a marriage of convenience with a man she barely knew. A soft knock at her door roused her fully. "Miss Blackwood," Sarah's voice called. "Are you awake?" "Yes, come in," Dahlia replied, sitting up and running a hand through her tangled hair. Sarah entered carrying a tray with coffee, toast, and eggs. "I thought you might like breakfast in your room this morning. It's going to be a busy day." "Thank you, that's very thoughtful." Dahlia accepted the tray gratefully. "What do you mean about a busy day?" Sarah bustled about the room, opening curtains and straightening things. "Mr. Xanders rode into town at first light. He's gone to fetch Judge Parker to perform the ceremony and to see about your belongings." Dahlia nearly spilled her coffee. "Today? We're getting married today. Best not to waste time, with Morton and the others likely planning their next move." Sarah opened the wardrobe and removed a dress Dahlia hadn't noticed before, a simple but elegant cream-colored gown. "I took the liberty of altering one of my daughter's old dresses. Jenny's about your size, and she left this behind when she married and moved to San Antonio. It's not fancy, but it's proper for a wedding." Dahlia stared at the dress, the reality of her situation suddenly hitting her with full force. "This is happening so fast." Sarah's expression softened as she laid the dress carefully across a chair. "Having second thoughts, dear." "I'm not sure," Dahlia admitted. "It's the right decision, I know that, but it's still overwhelming." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed. "Marriage always is, even under normal circumstances, and these aren't normal circumstances." She patted Dahlia's hand. "But if it helps, I've never seen Mr. Xanders do anything without thinking it through carefully. He's not an impulsive man. Except when it comes to rescuing women from auctions, apparently," Dahlia said with a small smile. Sarah laughed. "Well, there is that." She stood and moved toward the door. "Finish your breakfast and then I'll help you get ready. The judge should be here by noon." Left alone, Dahlia ate mechanically, her mind racing. By the end of the day, she would be Mrs. Jackson Xanders. The thought both terrified and surprisingly excited her. There was something about the reserved rancher that drew her to him, despite the unorthodox nature of their meeting and arrangement. True to Sarah's prediction, hoofbeats announced the arrival of riders just before midday. From her window, Dahlia saw Jackson dismounting alongside an older gentleman she presumed to be the judge. Behind them, a wagon carried what appeared to be trunks and boxes, her belongings from her cousin's house. Sarah appeared at her door a few minutes later. "They're here. Are you ready?" Dahlia smoothed the cream-colored dress, which fit surprisingly well after Sarah's alterations. Her hair was arranged simply but elegantly, and she wore her mother's pearl earrings, the only jewelry she had with her. As ready as I'll ever be, I suppose. Downstairs, she found Jackson and the judge in the parlor, along with Frank and several of the ranch hands who had cleaned up for the occasion. Jackson himself had changed from his work clothes into a dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and trim waist. His hair was neatly combed and he'd shaved. The transformation was striking. "Dahlia," he said, his eyes widening slightly as she entered the room. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy. "You look very handsome yourself." Judge Parker, a dignified man with silver hair and kind eyes, stepped forward. "Miss Blackwood, I'm Judge Thomas Parker. Jackson has explained some of your situation to me. Are you entering into this marriage of your own free will?" Dahlia appreciated the direct question. "I am, Your Honor." The judge nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Well then, shall we proceed?" The ceremony was brief but proper. They exchanged simple vows, promising to honor and protect one another. When it came time for the ring, Jackson surprised her by producing a delicate gold band. "It was my mother's," he explained quietly as he slipped it onto her finger. "I'd like you to have it." The simple gesture nearly brought tears to her eyes. This man, who had already done so much for her, was now giving her a family heirloom. "By the authority vested in me by the state of Texas, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Judge Parker concluded. "You may kiss your bride, Jackson." There was a moment of awkward hesitation. They hadn't discussed this part. But then Jackson leaned forward and placed a gentle, chaste kiss on Dahlia's lips. It lasted only a second, but Dahlia felt a surprising warmth spread through her at the contact. After congratulations from the assembled witnesses and a simple meal prepared by Sarah, Judge Parker prepared to depart. Before leaving, he took Jackson aside for a private word, then approached Dahlia. "Mrs. Xanders," he said, the new name sounding strange to her ears. "I've known your husband for several years now. He's a man of integrity, which is why I rode out here on such short notice. I believe you've made a wise choice, regardless of the unusual circumstances." "Thank you, Judge Parker. However," he continued, his voice lowering, "you should be aware that news travels fast in small communities. By now, everyone in Marfa knows about yesterday's auction and Jackson's claim that you were already married. The fact that you're now actually getting married will only confirm suspicions that the original claim was false. Which means Morton and the others will know as well," Dahlia concluded. "Precisely. I'd advise caution in the coming days." The judge glanced at Jackson, who was speaking with Frank near the door. "Jackson can handle himself, and this ranch is well situated for defense, but Morton is not a man to be underestimated." "I understand." Judge Parker tipped his hat. "Good luck to you both." As the judge's buggy disappeared down the road, Dahlia felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Jackson standing beside her, his expression concerned. "What did the judge say to you?" he asked. "That we should expect trouble." "That Morton and the others will know our marriage today proves your claim yesterday was false." Jackson nodded grimly. "I expected as much. We'll be ready." Dahlia glanced at the wagon containing her belongings. "How did you manage to get my things?" A small smile touched Jackson's lips. "Let's just say your cousin Edmund was susceptible to persuasion when confronted early this morning by myself, Frank, and a few of our most intimidating hands." His expression grew serious again. "I also discovered something you should know. Your father's debts, the ones Edmund claimed necessitated the auction, were largely fabricated." "What?" "But the papers he showed me, forgeries, most likely." Judge Parker confirmed that your father's estate was modest but solvent. Edmund appears to have been embezzling from it, then created false debts to cover his tracks. Dahlia felt anger rise within her. So he wasn't just trying to be rid of me, he was stealing from me as well. It appears so. The judge is looking into it further. If we can prove it, Edmund could face criminal charges. The thought brought Dahlia a grim satisfaction, but it was overshadowed by the more immediate concern of Morton and his men. What do we do now? Jackson gazed out at his ranch, eyes narrowed against the afternoon sun. We prepare. I've already sent 2 hands to watch the road from town. Frank's organizing the others to set up additional security. He turned to her, his expression softening. But first, I think my new wife deserves a proper tour of her new home, don't you? Despite the seriousness of their situation, Dahlia found herself smiling. I'd like that very much. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of activity. Jackson showed Dahlia every part of the ranch, from the main house to the smallest outbuilding. He introduced her to each of his hands by name, making it clear that she was to be respected as the mistress of Crescent X. He showed her his prized horses, explaining their bloodlines and training with obvious pride. By the time evening fell, Dahlia's head was spinning with new information, but she felt a growing appreciation for what Jackson had built here. The Crescent X wasn't just a ranch. It was a community, a place where people worked together and looked out for one another. After supper, Jackson escorted Dahlia back to the guest room, which Sarah had taken care to prepare with fresh linens and a vase of wildflowers. I meant what I said, Jackson told her at the door. About our arrangement, you have your privacy, your own space. Dahlia nodded, absurdly touched by his consideration. Thank you, but where will you sleep? My room is across the hall. If you need anything, I'm close by. He hesitated, then added, I know this isn't the wedding night either of us might have imagined, but I want you to know that I consider myself fortunate, Dahlia. Not many men can say they married a woman of such courage and grace. Before she could respond, he lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Good night, Mrs. Xanders. Good night. Husband, Dahlia replied, testing the word on her tongue. As she closed the door behind her, Dahlia leaned against it, her heart beating a strange, irregular rhythm. This marriage might have begun as a practical arrangement, but something in Jackson's eyes when he'd called her courageous made her wonder if it might become something more. The next morning, Dahlia awoke to an unfamiliar sound, raised voices from downstairs. Grabbing a robe, she hurried to investigate and found Jackson and Frank in intense discussion in the kitchen. Can't just sit here and wait for them to make a move, Frank was saying. And we can't leave the ranch undefended either, Jackson countered. He looked up as Dahlia entered. I'm sorry if we woke you. What's happening? She asked, tightening her robe around her. Jackson exchanged glances with Frank. One of our men spotted riders watching the ranch from the ridge to the east. Morton's men, most likely. Are they planning to attack? Not directly, not yet, Frank said. Morton's too smart for that. He knows a frontal assault on a defended ranch would lead to casualties his reputation couldn't afford. Then, what is he doing? Jackson ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Dahlia was beginning to recognize as a sign of frustration. Reconnaissance, planning, and sending a message that he's watching. What do? We continue as normally as possible while remaining vigilant, Jackson decided. Frank, double the watch, especially at night. Make sure everyone's armed, and send someone to check on the north pasture herd. I don't want any surprises there. Frank nodded and headed out, leaving Jackson and Dahlia alone in the kitchen. Jackson poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot on the stove and handed one to Dahlia. I'm sorry, he said after a moment. This isn't how I wanted to start our life together. Dahlia took a sip of the strong, hot coffee. None of this is your fault. It's my cousin and Morton who created this situation. Still, I promised to protect you, and now you're essentially under siege in your new home. At least I have a home, Dahlia pointed out, and a husband who keeps his promises. That's more than I had 2 days ago. Jackson's expression softened. You have a remarkable way of finding the bright side, Dahlia Xanders. The sound of her new name sent an unexpected thrill through her. Well, someone has to balance out your brooding husband. A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his features. Is that what I do? Brood. Magnificently, she confirmed, returning his smile over the rim of her cup. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Sarah, who bustled in with her usual energy. Good morning. I see you two are already up. I'll start breakfast right away. As Sarah moved about the kitchen, Dahlia became aware of her state of undress. I should get dressed, she murmured, setting down her cup. Of course, Jackson said. I need to check on the hands anyway. Sarah, would you help my wife bring her trunks upstairs after breakfast? I had them placed in the storage room last night. Your wife, Sarah repeated with a pleased smile. That has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Dahlia felt herself blush as she hurried back upstairs, Jackson's amused gaze following her. The next few days settled into an uneasy routine. The ranch continued its normal operations, but with heightened security. Riders still watched from the ridge, but made no move to approach. Jackson spent his days managing the ranch and organizing defenses, while Dahlia began to learn the workings of the household. She found herself enjoying the rhythm of ranch life more than she'd expected. Sarah patiently taught her about managing supplies, planning meals for the hands, and the 100 other details that kept a working ranch functioning smoothly. In the evenings, she and Jackson would share supper, their conversation growing more comfortable as they learned about each other. Jackson, she discovered, had a dry wit that emerged when he was relaxed. He was well-read, with a small but cherished collection of books in his study. He spoke little of his time in the war, but occasionally shared stories of his childhood in Missouri, where his father had been a horse trader. In turn, Dahlia told him about growing up in Austin, about her mother's early death and her father's devotion to her education. She spoke of her love for music and literature, and her dreams of someday traveling beyond Texas. They were careful never to touch on the temporary nature of their arrangement, as if by unspoken agreement. And each night, Jackson would escort her to her door, kiss her hand, and bid her good night with the same restrained courtesy. On the 5th day after their wedding, the pattern was broken. Dahlia was in the garden behind the house, helping Sarah harvest vegetables for supper, when she heard hoofbeats approaching fast. Looking up, she saw one of the ranch hands galloping in, his horse lathered and blowing hard. Jackson emerged from the barn and intercepted the rider. Dahlia couldn't hear their exchange, but she saw Jackson's posture stiffen. He gave several quick orders to the men nearby, then strode purposefully toward the house. Sarah, get inside, he called as he approached. Dahlia, you too, now. Something in his tone brooked no argument. Dahlia quickly gathered her basket and followed Sarah into the kitchen. What's happening? She asked as Jackson entered behind them. Morton and Burke are on their way here, with at least a dozen men. His voice was calm, but Dahlia could see the tension in his jaw. Here? Why? Sarah gasped. To pay their respects to the newlyweds, apparently, Jackson said grimly. At least, that's the message they sent ahead. They wouldn't come in force just for that, Dahlia said, fear tightening her throat. No, they wouldn't. Jackson moved to a cabinet and removed a wooden box from which he extracted a revolver. He checked it quickly, then handed it to Dahlia. Do you know how to use this? She took it with steady hands. My father taught me. I'm a decent shot. Jackson nodded approvingly. I hope you won't need it, but keep it with you. Sarah, there's a shotgun in the pantry. Get it ready." The older woman hurried to comply without question. "What are you going to do?" Dahlia asked. "Meet them in the yard. Frank and the men are positioning themselves strategically. If Morton and Burke want to cause trouble, they'll find we're well prepared." Dahlia placed a hand on his arm. "Be careful, please." Jackson covered her hand with his own. "Always." Then, to her surprise, he leaned down and kissed her, not the chaste peck of their wedding, but a real kiss, firm and full of unspoken emotion. Before she could react, he was gone, striding out to meet their visitors. From the kitchen window, Dahlia watched as a large group of riders approached the ranch house. At their head rode Zachary Morton, unmistakable even at a distance with his expensive suit and hat. Beside him was Randall Burke, equally well-dressed but with the easy posture of a lifelong horseman. Jackson stood waiting in the yard, Frank and 6 ranch hands arrayed behind him. All were armed, though no weapons were drawn. The tension was palpable even from where Dahlia watched. Morton and his party reined in about 20 feet from Jackson. After a brief exchange that Dahlia couldn't hear, Morton dismounted and approached alone. The 2 men stood talking for several minutes, Morton gesturing emphatically at one point. Jackson's posture remained rigid, his responses appearing short and firm. Finally, Morton turned and beckoned to his party. One man rode forward leading a riderless horse, a magnificent chestnut mare with a white blaze. The animal was clearly valuable, its tack expensive and ornate. Morton appeared to be making some kind of presentation. After a moment's hesitation, Jackson nodded and accepted the horse's reins. More words were exchanged, and then, to Dahlia's astonishment, the 2 men shook hands. Morton remounted, and the entire party wheeled their horses and rode away, leaving the chestnut mare behind with Jackson. Dahlia hurried outside as soon as they were gone. "What happened? What did they want?" Jackson was stroking the mare's neck, a thoughtful expression on his face. "They came to offer congratulations on our marriage, and to present this mare as a wedding gift." "A gift from Morton?" Dahlia couldn't hide her disbelief. "From Morton and Burke both," Jackson confirmed. "She's a fine animal, Arabian bloodlines if I'm not mistaken." Frank approached, his expression dubious. "Boss, you're not actually accepting a gift from those snakes." "I am," Jackson said firmly. "Because refusing would be a declaration of open hostility. This way, we maintain a veneer of civility while we figure out what they're really planning." "You don't believe this is a genuine peace offering?" Dahlia asked. Jackson looked at her, his eyes serious. "Do you?" She considered the men she'd seen at the auction, their cold eyes, their calculating expressions. "No," she admitted. "They want something." "Exactly." Jackson handed the mare's reins to one of the hands. "Take her to the south corral for now. Keep her separated from the other horses until I can examine her properly." As the hand led the mare away, Jackson turned to Frank. "What did you make of their party?" Frank frowned. "Armed to the teeth, but careful to keep their weapons holstered. And I noticed they seemed mighty interested in our defenses. Eyes everywhere, taking note of our men, our positions." "Reconnaissance," Jackson agreed. "They're planning something, but they're not ready to move yet." He turned to Dahlia. "This was a way to get onto the property, to see our setup firsthand. And to deliver a message," Dahlia added, understanding dawning, "that they can come here anytime they want in force." Jackson nodded grimly. "You catch on quick, Mrs. Xanders." "What do we do now?" she asked. "We stay alert. And we try to figure out what they're really after." He glanced at the retreating figure of the hand leading the mare. "Starting with that horse, I want to know if our gift comes with hidden surprises." Later that evening, after Jackson had thoroughly examined the mare, and found her to be exactly what she appeared, a high-quality Arabian with excellent bloodlines. He and Dahlia sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. "So the horse wasn't a trick," Dahlia mused, sipping a glass of lemonade. "Not in the way I feared," Jackson agreed. "She's a valuable animal worth at least $500, a genuine gift in that sense, which makes it all the more puzzling." "Why would Morton and Burke give us something so valuable?" Jackson leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "In their world, gifts create obligation. They're expecting something in return. What could we possibly have that they want? Besides my freedom, I mean." "That's what I've been trying to figure out." Jackson tapped his fingers against the arm of his chair. "Morton's primary interest is in mining. He's been buying up land all over the county to expand his operations. Does he want your land? The Crescent X wouldn't be much use to him for mining. We're mostly grazing land, with good water but no valuable minerals that I know of." Jackson frowned. "Burke, on the other hand, might want my grazing rights. He's been expanding his herd, and good pasture is always valuable. But neither of those explains why they would come together or why they'd make such a grand gesture." "No, it doesn't." Jackson fell silent for a moment, then straightened suddenly. "Unless there's something else, something they think I have that I don't know about." "What do you mean?" "About 6 months ago, I bought the northeast section of the ranch from a widow named Mrs. Callahan. Her husband had tried ranching but failed, and she wanted to go back east to her family. I paid a fair price, mainly because it had good water access for my horses." "And you think there might be something on that land that Morton wants?" "It's possible." Jackson stood, pacing the length of the porch. "The Callahan place is the closest part of my property to Morton's mining operations. And it's the most remote section of the ranch. I haven't done much with it yet beyond running some horses there." Dahlia set her glass down, intrigued. "So tomorrow we should ride out and take a look." Jackson glanced at her, surprise evident in his expression. "We?" "Yes, we," Dahlia confirmed, lifting her chin. "I'm your wife now, remember. If we're going to face this together, I need to understand what we're dealing with." A slow smile spread across Jackson's face. "You continue to surprise me, Dahlia Xanders." "Good," she replied, returning his smile. "A husband should never take his wife for granted." The next morning dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for riding. After breakfast, Jackson led Dahlia to the stables, where 2 horses were already saddled and waiting, his bay gelding and the chestnut mare that had been Morton's gift. "You want me to ride her?" Dahlia asked, eyeing the beautiful but unfamiliar horse. "She's gentle despite her spirit, and I think you'll suit each other." Jackson ran a hand along the mare's neck. "Besides, if there is something wrong with her, better we find out now with me nearby than later when you might be alone." Dahlia approached the mare cautiously. The horse regarded her with intelligent eyes, ears pricked forward with interest. "Does she have a name?" Morton called her Duchess. "Said she came from Kentucky originally." "Duchess," Dahlia repeated, stroking the mare's velvety nose. "Well, Duchess, shall we see if we get along?" With Jackson's help, she mounted, finding the side saddle comfortable and well balanced. Duchess stood patiently, responding to the slightest pressure of Dahlia's knees. "She's beautifully trained," Dahlia remarked as they set off, the mare moving with smooth, graceful strides. "Morton may be many things, but he appreciates quality," Jackson replied. "And he clearly wanted to impress you." "Me? Why would he care about impressing me?" Jackson gave her a sideways glance. "You underestimate your effect on men, Mrs. Xanders." Before Dahlia could respond to that surprising statement, Jackson urged his horse ahead, leading the way toward the northeast section of the ranch. They rode for nearly 2 hours, crossing varied terrain that showcased the beauty and diversity of the Crescent X. Rolling grasslands gave way to rugged hills dotted with oak and mesquite. A clear stream wound through the property, its banks lined with cottonwoods and willows. Dahlia found herself increasingly impressed with Jackson's domain. The land had a wild beauty, and she could see why he had chosen to make his home here, far from the constraints of city life. "It's breathtaking," she commented as they paused on a ridge overlooking a broad valley. "I had no idea Texas could be so beautiful." "Most people don't," Jackson agreed, satisfaction evident in his voice. "They see only the harshness, not the beauty beneath it." He pointed to the far side of the valley. "That's the old Callahan place, just beyond that line of trees. Their cabin is still standing, though I haven't had much reason to use it." As they descended into the valley, Dahlia noticed a change in the landscape. The lush grasses thinned, and the soil took on a reddish hue. Unusual rock formations jutted from the ground in places, their layers revealing the ancient history of the land. When they reached the cabin, a simple but solidly built structure nestled against a hillside. Jackson dismounted and helped Dahlia down. "We'll rest here for a bit. Let the horses drink." While the horses refreshed themselves at a nearby spring, Jackson and Dahlia explored the cabin. It was dusty but otherwise intact, with basic furniture still in place. "The Callahans left in a hurry," Jackson explained. "Mrs. Callahan said she couldn't bear to take most of their things, too many memories of her husband." Dahlia ran a finger along a shelf, leaving a trail in the dust. "It's sad, isn't it? They came out here with such hopes, and in the end, all that's left is a dusty cabin and abandoned belongings." "That's the frontier for you," Jackson said, his voice soft. "It makes and breaks people with equal indifference." After a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and dried fruit that Sarah had packed for them, they continued exploring the area around the cabin. Jackson was particularly interested in examining the unusual rock formations they had noticed on their approach. "I'm no geologist," he said, crouching to examine a reddish stone, "but these don't look like ordinary rocks to me." Dahlia joined him, picking up a smaller specimen. The rock was surprisingly heavy for its size, with an unusual reddish-brown coloration and metallic flecks that caught the sunlight. "What do you think it is?" Jackson turned the stone over in his hand, frowning. "I'm not certain, but—" He broke off, staring at the hillside above them with new intensity. "Let's take a closer look up there." They climbed the steep slope, Jackson occasionally stopping to examine more of the unusual rocks. Near the top, they discovered something unexpected, what appeared to be the entrance to a small mine, partially concealed by brush and fallen timber. "Callahan never mentioned any mining," Jackson said, his voice tight with suppressed excitement. "But someone was digging here, and not too long ago from the looks of it." Carefully clearing away some of the debris, they peered into the darkness of the mine shaft. It extended about 30 feet into the hillside before becoming too dark to see further. "We'd need lanterns to explore properly," Jackson said, "but I'm betting this is what Morton is after." "You think it's gold?" Dahlia asked. "Possibly, though these rocks don't look like typical gold ore to me." Jackson pocketed several samples. "Whatever it is, I intend to find out. And if it's valuable, Morton can make me a proper offer instead of playing games." They were about to descend when Dahlia noticed something glinting in the soil near the mine entrance. Bending down, she carefully brushed away the dirt to reveal a small metal object, a pendant on a broken chain. "Look at this," she said, holding it up for Jackson to see. The pendant was silver, shaped like a small cross with unusual engravings. Jackson took it, examining it closely. "This isn't American work. Spanish, maybe." He handed it back to her. "A strange thing to find here." Dahlia slipped the pendant into her pocket, oddly drawn to the mysterious object. Perhaps Mrs. Callahan lost it. Perhaps, Jackson agreed, though he sounded unconvinced. We should head back. I want to reach the ranch before dark, and I need to send someone to town to speak with Judge Parker. If there's something valuable on my land, I want to make sure my claim is legally ironclad. As they mounted their horses for the return journey, Dahlia glanced back at the hillside and the hidden mine entrance. You think Morton knows about the mine? I'm almost certain of it, Jackson replied grimly. The question is, how did he find out when Callahan apparently never discovered it? And what exactly does he think is in there that's worth going to such lengths to obtain? The ride back to the ranch was quicker than their outward journey, both of them eager to return before nightfall. As they approached the Crescent X, Dahlia was struck by how already it felt like home: the familiar buildings, the corrals full of horses, the smoke rising from the chimney of the main house. Frank met them in the yard, his expression troubled. "Glad you're back, boss. We've got a situation." Jackson dismounted quickly. "What kind of situation?" "Tanner's in town, asking questions about Mrs. Xanders, and he's been drinking heavy at his own saloon, making threats." "What kind of threats?" Dahlia asked as Jackson helped her down from Duchess. Frank glanced at her uncomfortably. "The kind a decent man doesn't repeat to a lady, but let's just say he's not taking kindly to losing out at the auction." Jackson's expression darkened. "Is he still in town?" "As of an hour ago, when Pete rode in. Said Tanner was working himself into a real state, talking about coming out here." "Alone?" "So far, but he's been trying to recruit men, offering good money to anyone willing to help him teach a lesson to the Xanders." Jackson ran a hand through his hair. "Just what we need." Morton and Burke playing their games from one direction, and now Tanner making direct threats from another. He turned to Dahlia. "I'm sorry. This is my fault for antagonizing them all at once." "No," Dahlia said firmly. "It's their fault for being the kind of men they are." She placed a hand on his arm. "We'll face this together, remember?" The warmth in her eyes almost made Jackson forget their audience. After a moment he nodded. "Together." He turned back to Frank. "Double the night watch, and send someone to town first thing tomorrow with those rock samples. Have them show them to Judge Parker. He'll know who to consult." As Frank went to carry out these instructions, Jackson and Dahlia headed toward the house, where Sarah was waiting anxiously at the door. "Thank goodness you're back," she exclaimed. "I've been worried sick since Frank told me about Tanner's threats." "We're fine, Sarah," Dahlia assured her, "and we've made some interesting discoveries." She glanced at Jackson, who nodded his permission to share what they'd found. Over supper, they told Sarah about the hidden mine and the unusual rocks. The housekeeper listened with wide eyes. "So that's why Morton's been so interested in the ranch," she marveled. "He must think there's a fortune to be made from that mine." "If there is, it's my fortune," Jackson said firmly. "I purchased that land fair and square, mine entrance included, whether Callahan knew about it or not." "What about the pendant?" Dahlia asked, removing it from her pocket to show Sarah. "Have you ever seen anything like it?" Sarah examined the silver cross carefully. "Can't say that I have. The markings are unusual. Almost looks like some kind of map." She handed it back to Dahlia. "Maybe it belongs to the Callahans after all. Mrs. Callahan was a religious woman, as I recall." Later that evening, as had become their custom, Jackson escorted Dahlia to her bedroom door. But tonight, something was different. The tension between them, always present but carefully controlled, seemed to have intensified. "Thank you for today," Dahlia said, lingering in the doorway. "For letting me be part of it." "You were more than just part of it," Jackson replied. "You found the pendant. You asked the right questions. You're a partner in this, Dahlia, not just a bystander." "Partner," she repeated softly. Is that what I am to you, Jackson? Something flickered in his eyes, desire, certainly, but also uncertainty. You're my wife, he said finally. Whatever that means to you, that's what you are to me. Dahlia's heart pounded as she considered her next words carefully. And if being your wife means more than separate rooms and formal goodnights, Jackson's breath caught visibly. Dahlia, I promised you wouldn't have to. I know what you promised, she interrupted gently. But what if I want more? What if I want a real marriage, not just a legal arrangement? Are you certain? He asked, his voice hoarse. Because once we cross that line, I don't think I could go back to pretending. In answer, Dahlia stepped forward and placed her hands on his chest. Rising on tiptoes, she pressed her lips to his in a kiss that started tentative but quickly blazed into something more passionate. Jackson responded instantly, his arms encircling her waist, drawing her against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that properly since the moment I saw you in that auction house. Why didn't you? She whispered. Because I needed you to come to me of your own free will, not out of gratitude or obligation. He traced her cheek with gentle fingers. I want you to choose me, Dahlia, not just accept me as the lesser of evils. I do choose you, she assured him, her eyes shining with certainty. Not because you saved me, but because of who you are. The man who built this ranch with his own hands. The man who treats his workers with respect. The man who keeps his promises. Jackson's answer was another kiss, deeper and more urgent than the first. Without breaking contact, he lifted her into his arms and carried her through the doorway, kicking the door closed behind them. That night, their marriage became real in every sense, as they discovered each other with a passion that surprised them both. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Dahlia traced lazy patterns on Jackson's chest. I've been thinking about the pendant, she murmured. About the markings. Jackson chuckled, his chest rumbling beneath her ear. That's what you're thinking about right now, she smiled against his skin. Not entirely, but Sarah said something that's been nagging at me, that it looks like a map. And what if it is a map? What if it shows the location of something in that mine? Something valuable enough that someone would create a special marker for it. Jackson was quiet for a moment, considering. It's possible. The Spanish were in this region long before Anglo settlers. They were always searching for gold and silver. Could that be what's in the mine? Spanish treasure? More likely it's just a religious object that someone lost, Jackson said practically. But tomorrow, we'll take another look at it in better light. Dahlia yawned, suddenly overwhelmed by the day's events and discoveries. Whatever it is, it's ours now. Yes, Jackson agreed, tightening his arms around her. Ours. For the first time since her father's death, Dahlia fell asleep feeling completely safe and cherished, her head pillowed on her husband's chest. Whatever challenges awaited them, Morton, Burke, Tanner, the mysterious mind, they would face them together. The next morning, Dahlia awoke to find Jackson already dressed and standing by the window, examining the silver pendant in the early light. She watched him silently for a moment, admiring the strong lines of his profile, the concentration in his expression. "Good morning, husband," she said finally, sitting up and holding the sheet modestly to her chest. Jackson turned, his face softening into a smile. "Good morning, wife. Sleep well." "Better than I have in months," she admitted. "You, same." He crossed to the bed and sat beside her, leaning in for a gentle kiss. Though I didn't get much actual sleep, Dahlia blushed, remembering the passion they had shared. Neither did I. Jackson held up the pendant. "You might be right about this being a map. Look here." He pointed to the markings engraved around the edges of the cross. These could be directions or distances, And this symbol in the center, I think it might represent a specific location. In the mine, possibly. We need to go back with proper equipment, lanterns, tools. I'll organize an expedition today. Dahlia nodded, then froze as a thought struck her. Jackson, what if the pendant isn't just a map to something valuable? What if it's a warning? A warning. Think about it. The mine was hidden, deliberately concealed. What if there's something dangerous there? Something someone wanted to make sure was never disturbed? Jackson frowned, turning the pendant over in his hands. It's possible, I suppose. All the more reason to proceed carefully. He placed the pendant on the bedside table and stood. I need to speak with Frank, make arrangements. Will you be all right getting ready on your own? Of course, Dahlia assured him. I'm not completely helpless, you know, Jackson smiled. No, you most certainly are not. And that's one of the many things I admire about you, Mrs. Xanders. After he left, Dahlia dressed quickly and made her way downstairs, where she found Sarah in the kitchen, humming as she prepared breakfast. Good morning, Sarah, Dahlia greeted her, unable to keep a certain glow from her expression. Sarah took one look at her and smiled knowingly. Good morning indeed, Mrs. Xanders. You look well rested. Dahlia felt her cheeks warm. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who knows what to look for, Sarah assured her. And I'm happy for you both. It's about time this house had a proper marriage in it. Before Dahlia could respond, the kitchen door burst open and Frank rushed in, his expression urgent. Sarah, where's the boss? He demanded. I thought he was with you, Dahlia said, instantly alert. He went to find you after we woke up. He never made it to me, Frank said grimly. And we've got trouble. Riders coming in fast from the direction of town, at least a dozen of them led by Tanner. Dahlia's heart stuttered. Where's Jackson? We'll find him, Sarah said firmly. Frank, sound the alarm. Get the men ready. Frank nodded and rushed back out while Sarah moved to a cabinet and retrieved a shotgun. Here, she said, handing it to Dahlia. You remember how to use this? Yes, Dahlia confirmed, checking that the weapon was loaded. But I need to find Jackson first. He can take care of himself, Sarah reminded her. But be careful. If Tanner's here in force, this could get ugly. Dahlia hurried outside, scanning the ranch yard for any sign of her husband. Men were rushing to defensive positions, grabbing rifles and taking cover behind buildings and water troughs. In the distance, she could see the cloud of dust raised by approaching riders. Jackson, she called, moving toward the stables where she had last seen him heading. Instead of Jackson, she found Pete, one of the younger hands, saddling horses. Pete, have you seen Mr. Xanders? Yes, madam, Pete answered, working quickly. He rode out about 20 minutes ago, heading for the north pasture, said something about checking the herd. Alone. With Tanner coming. He didn't know about Tanner then, madam. We just got word from the lookout a few minutes ago. Dahlia made a quick decision. Saddle Duchess for me, I'm going after him. But madam, it's not safe. Saddle the horse, Pete, she repeated firmly. Now. Recognizing the determination in her voice, Pete complied, helping her mount. The north pasture is about 2 miles that way, he said, pointing. Follow the creek and you'll find it, but please be careful if you run into Tanner's men. I'll be fine, Dahlia assured him, though her heart was racing with fear not for herself, but for Jackson, out there alone and unaware of the danger. She urged Duchess into a gallop, heading north away from the ranch buildings. Behind her, she could hear shouts as Tanner's party arrived at the ranch, but she didn't look back. Her focus was entirely on finding Jackson before it was too late. The creek led her through a narrow valley, then opened up into a broad meadow where a small herd of cattle grazed peacefully. At the far end, she spotted a lone rider moving slowly along the tree-lined Jackson, checking the perimeter of the pasture. Jackson, she called, urging Duchess toward him. Jackson, he turned at the sound of her voice, surprise evident even at a distance. As she drew closer, she could see confusion transform into concern. "Dahlia, what are you doing out here?" he demanded as she reined in beside him. "Tanner," she gasped, breathless from her hard ride. "He's at the ranch with at least a dozen men. They arrived just after you left." Jackson's expression hardened. "Are you sure it was Tanner?" Frank saw them coming. "He said Tanner was leading them." Without another word, Jackson wheeled his horse around, spurring it back toward the ranch at a full gallop. Dahlia followed, Duchess easily matching the pace of Jackson's mount. As they crested the final rise overlooking the ranch, they pulled up short at the scene before them. Men on horseback surrounded the main house and outbuildings. Gunshots rang out sporadically, though it seemed to be warning fire rather than a full-scale battle. "Stay here," Jackson ordered, drawing his rifle from its scabbard. "I'm coming with you," Dahlia insisted. "We face this together, remember?" Jackson glanced at her, seeing the determination in her eyes. After a moment, he nodded. "Stay close, and if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments." They rode down the slope at a controlled pace, approaching from an angle that kept them partially concealed by trees, until they were much closer to the ranch buildings. As they neared, Dahlia could make out Tanner's stocky figure on a large black horse, shouting orders to his men. "Circle around to the back of the house," Jackson instructed her. "Find Sarah and stay with her. I'm going to deal with Tanner directly." Dahlia wanted to protest, but recognized the wisdom of his plan. "Be careful," she urged, touching his arm briefly before guiding Duchess away toward the back of the main house. She reached the kitchen door without incident, finding Sarah waiting inside with her shotgun at the ready. "Thank God," the housekeeper breathed when she saw Dahlia. "Did you find Jackson?" "He's here," Dahlia confirmed, dismounting and tethering Duchess to a post before hurrying inside. "He's gone to confront Tanner directly." "Brave but foolish," Sarah muttered. "Tanner's got at least 15 men with him, and they're all armed. What do they want?" "Have they said?" "You," Sarah said bluntly. "Tanner's claiming that the auction was legal, that he had the winning bid until Jackson interfered. He's demanding we turn you over to him." Cold fear washed over Dahlia. "And our men," holding their positions, following Frank's orders. "No one's been hurt yet, but it's only a matter of time if this standoff continues." Through the kitchen window, Dahlia could see Jackson riding boldly into the center of the ranch yard, directly toward Tanner. The saloon owner turned to face him, a malicious smile spreading across his broad face. "Xanders," Tanner's voice carried clearly. "Finally decided to show yourself, have you?" "This is my property, Tanner," Jackson replied calmly. "You and your men are trespassing. I suggest you leave while you still can." Tanner laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Not without what's mine." "The girl, Xanders, your supposed wife. We all know that certificate was forged. Judge Parker confirmed there was no record of your marriage until after the auction." "Dahlia Xanders is my legal wife," Jackson stated, "whether you like it or not." "A marriage under false pretenses is no marriage at all," Tanner sneered. "The law's on my side, Xanders. I had the winning bid." "The auction was illegal from the start," Jackson countered. "You can't sell a human being, Tanner, no matter how you dress it up." "Tell that to her cousin." He had legal guardianship, and he authorized the sale of her labor contract. Tanner spat on the ground. "Now, are you going to hand her over, or do my boys start shooting?" Jackson's voice remained steady. "You're not taking my wife anywhere, Tanner. Not today, not ever. And if your men start shooting, they'll find we're well prepared to shoot back." From their positions around the ranch, Jackson's hands raised their rifles in emphasis. Though outnumbered, they held defensive positions that would make any assault costly. Tanner's face darkened with rage. "You're making a big mistake, Xanders. I've got friends in high places. The law will side with me. The law will side with justice, came a new voice from the edge of the yard. All heads turned to see Judge Parker riding in, accompanied by several official-looking men wearing badges. Behind them rode Edmund Blackwood, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Judge Parker," Tanner sputtered. "This isn't what it looks like. It looks like armed trespass to me," the judge interrupted coldly. "Possibly attempted kidnapping as well. Marshal Thompson might have a different interpretation, of course." He nodded to one of the badge-wearing men. "Seems pretty clear-cut to me, Judge," the marshal replied. "Mr. Tanner and his friends are on private property with weapons drawn. That's enough to justify arrests right there." Tanner's men began to look nervous, some edging their horses backward. "Now wait just a minute," Tanner protested. "I have a legal claim to the woman. Ask Blackwood here, he'll confirm it." All eyes turned to Edmund, who visibly wilted under the scrutiny. That is to say. There was an auction, yes, but what, Mr. Blackwood?" Judge Parker pressed. Edmund swallowed hard. "But I may have exaggerated certain aspects of my authority and the debts I claimed were owed." "Exaggerated," the judge repeated dryly. "An interesting choice of words for fraud, Mr. Blackwood." Dahlia, unable to contain herself any longer, emerged from the house and walked to Jackson's side. "Cousin Edmund," she greeted coldly. "How surprising to see you here, given your eagerness to be rid of me just days ago." Edmund couldn't meet her eyes. "Dahlia, I can explain." "Save your explanations for the court," Marshal Thompson advised. "We've received formal complaints about your financial dealings, Mr. Blackwood. Judge Parker has issued a warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud and embezzlement." As one of the marshal's deputies moved to take Edmund into custody, Tanner made a desperate play. "This changes nothing. The girl was promised to me at the auction." "The girl is a grown woman and my lawfully wedded wife," Jackson stated firmly, dismounting and moving to stand protectively beside Dahlia. "Our marriage has been properly registered and witnessed. Judge Parker can confirm that," the judge nodded. "Indeed." While the initial claim at the auction may have been premature, Mr. and Mrs. Xanders have since formalized their union in full compliance with the law. Tanner's face contorted with fury. "This is corruption, collusion." He drew his pistol with surprising speed, aiming directly at Jackson. "If I can't have her, then neither will you." Several things happened at once. The marshal and his deputies drew their weapons. Jackson pushed Dahlia behind him, and a single shot rang out not from Tanner's gun, but from a rifle at the edge of the yard held by Frank. Tanner howled in pain, his pistol flying from his hand as Frank's bullet struck his wrist. He clutched his bleeding arm, curses spilling from his lips. "That was a warning shot," Frank called calmly, keeping his rifle trained on Tanner. "The next one won't be." "Arrest him," Marshal Thompson ordered his deputies, who quickly moved to disarm and secure Tanner. "The rest of you," he addressed Tanner's men, "drop your weapons and disperse, unless you want to join your employer in jail." The men, seeing which way the wind was blowing, were quick to comply. Within minutes, the ranch yard had cleared of all but the marshal's party, Tanner now in handcuffs, Edmund, looking thoroughly defeated, and the Crescent ex-residents. Judge Parker approached Jackson and Dahlia. "I apologize for not arriving sooner. We came as quickly as we could once we received word of Tanner's intentions." "How did you know?" Dahlia asked. "One of Tanner's men got cold feet and warned the telegraph operator in town," the judge explained. "The operator sent word to the marshal's office and they contacted me." Jackson nodded gratefully. "Your timing was impeccable nonetheless, Judge. We're in your debt." "Not at all," the judge smiled. "Though I am curious about what you discovered on your property yesterday. Your man mentioned some unusual rocks." Jackson glanced at Dahlia, who nodded encouragingly. "We found what appears to be a small mine on the old Callahan property," he explained, reaching into his pocket for one of the rock samples. "And these." The judge examined the rock with interest. "I'm no expert, but this could be copper ore, possibly with silver inclusions." "Valuable?" Dahlia asked. "Potentially very valuable, especially with the railroad coming through. Mining operations would have a direct line to eastern markets." The judge handed the sample back. "I suspect that's what Morton was really after with his wedding gift and false cordiality. He must have known about the mine somehow. Which raises the question of how he knew when Callahan didn't," Jackson mused. As if in answer, Marshal Thompson approached, leading a subdued Edmund. "Mr. Xanders, Mrs. Xanders, this man has something he'd like to tell you." Edmund cleared his throat nervously. "I may have made a deal with Morton about the mine." "What kind of deal?" Jackson demanded. "When my Uncle Dahlia's father died, I found papers among his effects. Old Spanish land grants maps. One showed a mine on what is now your property." Edmund couldn't meet their eyes. "I sold the information to Morton for a considerable sum." "So that's how he knew," Dahlia said, pieces falling into place. "And the pendant, was that my father's as well?" Edmund looked surprised. "Pendant? I don't know anything about a pendant." Dahlia withdrew the silver cross from her pocket, holding it up. "We found this near the mine entrance." Edmund shook his head. "I've never seen that before. The papers I found were just maps and deeds." "Then it seems there are still mysteries to uncover," Judge Parker observed. "But they'll have to wait for another day. Marshal Thompson needs to get his prisoners to the county jail." As the marshal's party prepared to depart with Tanner and Edmund, Dahlia stepped close to her cousin. "Why, Edmund? Why did you hate me enough to sell me like property?" Edmund had the grace to look ashamed. "I didn't hate you, Dahlia. Your father always favored you. Everything was for you, the best education, the best opportunities. When he died, I thought it was finally my turn." He sighed heavily. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Dahlia studied him, searching for the cousin she had once known in the bitter man before her. "I forgive you," she said finally. "Not for your sake, but for mine. I won't carry hatred in my heart." Edmund's eyes widened in surprise, but before he could respond, the deputy led him away to join the rest of the departing party. As the dust from their horses faded into the distance, Jackson turned to Dahlia. "That was generous of you, forgiving him. As I said, it wasn't for him." She linked her arm through his. "It was for us, for our future together." Jackson's expression softened. "Our future," he repeated as if testing the words. "I like the sound of that." Frank approached, his rifle now slung over his shoulder. "Boss, the men are asking if they should stay on alert, in case Morton decides to follow Tanner's example." "Tell them to stay vigilant but stand down from battle stations," Jackson decided. "And Frank, thank you. That was a fine shot." Frank tipped his hat. "Just doing my job, boss." He glanced between them with a knowing smile. "I'll leave you two to discuss your future plans." As Frank walked away, Jackson drew Dahlia close. "What do you want now, Mrs. Xanders? Now that the immediate dangers are dealt with?" Dahlia considered the question seriously. "I want to explore that mine properly with lanterns and tools. I want to discover what the pendant means. I want to build a life here with you that's about more than just survival or protection." She looked up at him, her heart in her eyes. "I want a real marriage, Jackson, a real future together." Jackson's arms tightened around her. "That's a tall order, Mrs. Xanders." "Too tall." "Not at all," he assured her, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. "I'm just the man to fill it." The kiss they shared then, in the middle of the ranch yard with the Texas sun beating down on them, was a promise as binding as any wedding vow. Whatever challenges still awaited them, Morton's schemes, the mystery of the mine, the hard work of building a life together, they would face them as they had faced Tanner, united, strong, and unafraid. In the months that followed, life at the Crescent X settled into a new rhythm. The mine yielded exactly what Judge Parker had suspected: a rich vein of copper ore with significant silver content. With the judge's help, Jackson established legal mining rights and contracted workers to begin extracting the ore. Morton made one attempt to challenge their claim, filing a lawsuit based on a supposed prior agreement with Callahan. But Judge Parker, presented with the original deed and no evidence of Morton's claims, dismissed the case. Faced with defeat, Morton finally offered to buy the mining rights outright for a substantial sum. After careful consideration, Jackson and Dahlia agreed to sell him the rights to the mine, only not the land itself, with terms that guaranteed jobs for local men and proper environmental considerations. The proceeds from the sale and ongoing royalties ensured the financial security of the Crescent X for generations to come. Tanner was convicted of attempted kidnapping and armed trespass, receiving a 10-year sentence in the territorial prison. Edmund, facing lesser charges but clearly guilty, was sentenced to 5 years. The ranch house that had once belonged to Dahlia's father was sold, with the proceeds properly allocated to Dahlia as his rightful heir. As for the mysterious silver pendant, its secrets gradually revealed themselves through careful study and consultation with historians familiar with Spanish colonial exploration. The markings were indeed a map not just to the mine, but to a small cache of artifacts left by Spanish missionaries who had visited the area nearly 2 centuries earlier. The cache, discovered exactly where the pendant indicated, contained religious items, journals, and a small amount of silver historically significant, but not the vast treasure some might have imagined. Dahlia and Jackson donated most of the artifacts to a museum in Austin, keeping only the pendant as a reminder of how their journey together had begun. On a warm spring day a year after their wedding, Dahlia stood on the porch of the main house, watching as Jackson worked with a young colt in the corral. His patience with the animal was remarkable, firm but never harsh, guiding rather than forcing. Sarah joined her, bringing a glass of lemonade. "He's good with them, isn't he? The best," Dahlia agreed, accepting the drink gratefully. "He says horses are honest, no pretense." "Unlike people," Sarah observed with a chuckle. "Some people," Dahlia corrected, her hand moving unconsciously to her belly, where the first subtle swell of pregnancy was just becoming noticeable. "Others are as honest as they come." Sarah followed the gesture, her eyes widening. "Dahlia, are you?" Dahlia nodded, a radiant smile spreading across her face. "About 3 months along, according to Dr. Miller. We're going to have a baby in the fall." "Oh, my dear girl," Sarah engulfed her in a careful hug. "Have you told Jackson yet?" "Not yet. I wanted to be sure first." Dahlia's eyes returned to the corral, where Jackson was now removing the training gear from the colt, giving the young horse an approving pat. "I'm going to tell him tonight. He'll be over the moon," Sarah predicted. "He was born to be a father." Later that evening, after supper, Dahlia and Jackson sat on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The air was scented with spring flowers and the promise of summer to come. "I received a letter from Judge Parker today," Jackson mentioned. "Morton's paying the royalties on time, and the mine's producing well. The judge says our arrangement is being studied as a model for other landowner mining partnerships in the territory." "That's wonderful," Dahlia said, leaning against his shoulder. "I'm glad we found a solution that benefits everyone." Jackson nodded, his arm around her shoulders. The judge also mentioned that Tanner's saloon has been purchased by a respectable businessman from San Antonio, plans to turn it into a proper hotel and restaurant. "Marfa's changing," Dahlia observed, "growing more civilized." "The whole frontier is," Jackson agreed. "In another generation, the Wild West won't be so wild anymore." He gazed out at their ranch with satisfaction. "But I think we've carved out a good piece of it for ourselves." Dahlia took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Speaking of carving out a piece for ourselves, I have some news." Jackson turned to look at her, curiosity in his eyes. "What kind of news?" "The kind that means we'll need to prepare a nursery," Dahlia said softly. "By autumn." For a moment, Jackson stared at her uncomprehendingly. Then understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by a joy so pure it took Dahlia's breath away. "A baby," he whispered, his hand moving to cover hers on her stomach. "We're having a baby." Dahlia nodded, her own eyes filling with happy tears at his reaction. "In October, Dr. Miller thinks." Jackson pulled her into his arms, his embrace careful yet exuberant. "Dahlia Xanders, you continue to amaze me," he murmured against her hair. "Just when I think I couldn't possibly love you more, you prove me wrong. So you're happy about it?" she asked, though his reaction made the question almost unnecessary. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," he assured her, pulling back to look into her eyes. There aren't words, Dahlia." "A child, our child." His voice was filled with wonder. Later that night, as they lay together in what was now their shared bedroom, Jackson's hand rested protectively over Dahlia's belly. "Boy or girl, what do you think?" he asked. "I don't know," Dahlia replied honestly. "As long as our baby is healthy, I don't mind either way." "I was thinking," Jackson said hesitantly, "if it's a boy, maybe we could name him after your father, and if it's a girl, perhaps after my mother, Elizabeth." The thoughtfulness of the suggestion brought fresh tears to Dahlia's eyes. "I'd like that very much." 6 months later, as the first leaves of autumn began to turn, Dahlia gave birth to a healthy baby boy with Jackson's dark hair and her own blue eyes. They named him James, after Dahlia's father, with Thomas as a middle name to honor Judge Parker, who had done so much to help them secure their future. The judge himself came to the christening, as did many of the ranch hands and their families. Even Mrs. Callahan made the journey from St. Louis to see the child born on what had once been her land. "It's fitting," the older woman told Dahlia as she cradled the infant. "My husband and I couldn't make that land yield what we needed, but you and Mr. Xanders have brought new life from it, in more ways than one." As the years passed, the Crescent X prospered. The horse breeding operation expanded, with Jackson's bloodlines becoming renowned throughout Texas and beyond. Dahlia established a small school on the ranch for the children of the hands and nearby homesteaders, putting her education to good use. Young James was joined 2 years later by a sister, Elizabeth, and eventually by another brother, Frank, named after the loyal foreman who became the children's honorary uncle. Marfa grew from a frontier outpost to a proper town, with a school, a church, and businesses that served the increasing population. The railroad brought new opportunities and connections to the wider world. Zachary Morton, having finally accepted that direct confrontation would not succeed, eventually became, if not a friend, then at least a respectful business associate. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jackson surprised Dahlia with a special gift, a new pendant to replace the Spanish cross they had donated to the museum. This one was custom-made by a silversmith in Austin, shaped like a crescent with a small X inlaid in gold at its center. "To remind you of where our story began," he explained as he fastened it around her neck, "and of the home we've built together." Dahlia touched the pendant, then leaned in to kiss her husband. "As if I could ever forget," she murmured against his lips. "You saved me, Jackson Xanders." "No," he corrected gently, his arms encircling her waist. "We saved each other." From the porch of their ranch house, they could see their 3 children playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm Texas breeze. Beyond them stretched the Crescent X, now one of the most successful operations in the county. And beyond that, the endless horizon that had once represented such uncertainty now promised only more adventures to come. "You ever regret it?" Jackson asked suddenly. "That day at the auction. Taking a chance on a stranger who claimed to be your husband." Dahlia looked up at the man who had gone from rescuer to husband to father of her children. The man whose strength and integrity had never wavered, whose love had transformed her life from one of fear to one of joy. "Never," she said with absolute certainty. "Not for a single moment." And as the sun set over their land, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Jackson and Dahlia Xanders stood together, arms entwined, hearts beating as one, no longer strangers bound by necessity, but partners united by the deepest love, forged in the crucible of the West and tempered by the passage of time into something unbreakable and eternal.